Hello, my friends. I hope you can hear me now. Let us just very quickly check out that you can hear me well. I'm just looking at the chat while checking out that the connection is perfect. Everything works great. And welcome to Canadian Immigration Channel Live. Just 1 second. Yep, here we go. I can see it. Everything's good. So today we're starting this series of webinars where we would be talking about immigration to Canada with low requirements. When we're talking about low requirements, it would pretty much be everything from language test results to education credentials assessment and so on, right? So where you do not have enough points to immigrate to Canada through one of the direct streams, say through express entry directly through federal skilled worker. Now, we will, of course, be talking today about basics as well. What are the direct options? What are indirect options are? How to look at them. So let us just start with the basics. Now, when it comes down to immigration to Canada, you should be looking at two opportunities or two separate options, if you will. You could be looking at direct and indirect streams. Before we just quickly proceed further, let me just remind you, if you're looking for us to help you with your personal case and assess your situation, you could go and use the short link cictv.ca/go. One of our specialists would be in contact with you, and further on for live discussions for master classes like this one, cictv.ca/live, and that is the link where you could book your attendance for next masterclasses, next webinars. They're always free of charge. They're tailored and designed for you to help you out. Now, with respect to the chat section, of course, I'm mostly welcoming you to add questions, because at the end of the day, again, we're spending our time here. It's 9:30 p.m. in Toronto, and we're spending this time specifically and deliberately for you so that you're able to ask your questions. We would be more than glad to address your concerns, answer these questions, though we will have some time at the end of the stream where we will be addressing those questions and concerns and helping you out with whatever questions you have with respect to the subject of this webinar. If there is possible for me to check out if the question in the chat section is directly related on what you would see on the screen, of course I will be getting back to it and I will try to read it and just address it immediately. Otherwise, we will be getting back to your questions, to your concerns later on in a question and answer section, which is again dedicated specifically to you, to us having this live conversation with you. Now, when we're talking about immigration scenarios to Canada, there are two possible pathways in here, right? Direct immigration and multi-step immigration. I'm not talking here right now about specific programs. I just want you to understand the basics, where we are standing, right? Now, how these streams are working with each other, how they correlate with each other, and how not. So when it comes down to direct stream or direct immigration, it's pretty clear, right? You have a program from the beginning, you meet the requirements of the program, and you immigrate. I'm not necessarily saying that the requirements are easy, but as long as these requirements are met, you're able to immigrate to Canada without going anywhere further. Multi-step immigration pathway is a different option where you incorporate different immigration streams, temporary visas, and so on to make sure that your final aim and final goal with immigration to Canada is accomplished. We will talk today in more details about this, and we will of course start with the easiest one for understanding, with the direct immigration. When it comes down to direct immigration options, which would allow you to immigrate to Canada with low IELTS test requirements, there are, however surprising it might be, multiple options available. Not all of them are open for each and every individual because they are different and they're targeting different groups, but all in all, these options are there. They're open, they are available for general public, so you could apply. And most of them, they're standing, except for Federal Skilled Trades Program, they're standing aside from express entry. What I want us to understand in this masterclass today, that express entry is just one of the ways to immigrate to Canada. Yes, it's a huge pathway, if you will, with a number of small streams incorporated in it, but it's still not the biggest one, or it's still, I would say, not the only one to immigrate to Canada. When we're talking about immigration pathways, let us start with the pilot programs. Now, pilot immigration programs are tailored and designed for those individuals who are able to come to specific areas in Canada, traditionally underpopulated areas, those who have a job offer in those areas, who are able to settle there, live there, stay there. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that these areas are, say, have harsh weather conditions, that they are so underpopulated that there is barely like nothing to eat and so on. Of course not. We're talking about areas where they just desperately need additional specialists to come in, because typically highly specialized individuals would prefer other places, other locations to live in, right? So say if we give an example in here, let us look at the rural pilot. A city of Sudbury with a population of about 200, well, metropolitan city of Sudbury could be about 300,000 people, right? Versus Toronto and suburbs with 5 million people, right? Where you would go probably to the latest one, right? That is why Sudbury is looking to attract specialists under the rural pilot. Now, when we're talking about pilots, there are two separate ways to look at them. One pilot program or pilot programs are incorporated under the federal streams, right? So that are the rural pilot, that's Atlantic pilot, that's caregiver pilot, and all of them have this or that way low IELTS test requirements, right? So it all starts with CLB 4 to CLB 5. Now, there are provincial pilots. The difference here is that all you get after you are nominated by the province, or after you are accepted in this pilot and processed, you get provincial nomination, which is not the end of the story. And after the province nominates you, you have to shift your attention to federal immigration. So you have to apply for the final step to federal government. I think we spoke about it in one of our previous webinars, but bottom line here, we got two separate pilot streams. Federal one and provincial one. And there are multiple of those pilots. They are listed on this screen, and again, like we've pretty much put whatever we could on a slide, but there are different pilots to look at, and most of them have low threshold for your language test results. Self-employed immigration program is probably the only immigration program in Canada which by definition does not require you to have your language test results. It has the points grade system, which would be qualified as a pass, non-pass, right? In other words, you have to score minimum points in order to apply. Say if you got bachelor's degree, if you're under 50, if you got 3 years of work experience, related work experience in self-employed in the last 5 years, that would be more than enough for you to meet the minimum threshold without your language test. So you don't necessarily have to take your IELTS test, or you necessarily take your French test, right? Now, speaking about self-employed, it's not for everyone, of course, right? So what we have to do here is we have to understand that self-employed probably has something to do with the name of the program. It's not necessarily for individuals who are working for themselves. It is for everyone who is able to prove to the Canadian government that they are either performing artists or sportsmen, or there are some certain surrounding occupations, right? So you have this cultural part in your work which could contribute to this development, cultural development of Canada, and that's what makes this program stand aside. I would still strongly recommend you to take your language test results, because it would be almost impossible to prove to officers that, look, at the end of the day, I will be a performing artist, but I'm not able to communicate in English or French. How would you be performing in Canada, right? But regardless, your language test results should not necessarily be anywhere close to CLB 9. And the only reason we're discussing these immigration pathways today is because, well, Express Entry as of now has such a high threshold of selection that lots of applicants are looking for alternatives, right? We spoke about alternatives before in our previous masterclasses when we were discussing opportunities above and beyond Express Entry, or how to add additional points to your Express Entry. Now, what I want you to do is to look at Plan B. What if Express Entry is not working for me at all, right? Like, what if I want to see something above and beyond? Well, here we go. Pilots for the start. Self-employed program, right? We could go for self-employed immigration if we have enough of work experience as this performing artist or as a sportsman, right? Look at your spouse. Maybe he or she is able to actually qualify for it. Wonderful program. And previously, The major drawback of it was the processing time, which was very close to 5 or 6 years. As of now, it's less than 2 years, which is still longer than Express Entry, but let's face the reality. Right now, we're in COVID, right? Express Entry with the add-on of PNP would still be somewhere close to a year and a half, which comes down to the point where self-employed might be a very, very good alternative. By the way, mind you, you could apply for Federal Skilled Worker Program. You could apply through Express Entry together with self-employed. So as long as these two programs do not collide, as long as your experience qualifies for both, you could go for both of them. It's perfectly fine. Federal Skilled Trades Program is the only one out of this list which would go directly to Express Entry. But Federal Skilled Trades has a low threshold of your language test, though you have to have either a job offer in Canada or you have to have your trade qualification confirmed in Canada. Now, we will talk about the latest in a second. So when it comes down to Federal Skilled Trades, you have to make sure that your language requirements are on par with CLB 4 to CLB 5, as far as I remember it correctly. So there are 2 CLB 4 requirements, 2 CLB 5 requirements. In order to qualify for the program, as I said, you have to have a job offer in Canada in trades, which is way more difficult to get rather than say, but we're talking about the second option, right? You could get yourself a trade certificate which was assessed in Canada. How to do this? Well, you could book yourself a test in one of the trade colleges. Take the Trade College of Ontario. It's still open, it's still working despite COVID, right? You have to submit to them your trade certificates, your work experience, your experience letters, right? Your educational credentials. They will be looking at it, and if everything is fine, they could qualify you to take an exam. For the exam, you would have to come to Canada, which is not extremely difficult. Yes, you will have to take your temporary visa, but it's still possible to come here, take an exam. And the fact that you took this exam, and if you pass the exam successfully, right, would allow you later on to transform it into your immigration under Federal Skilled Trades Program. Remember, we were talking before about separate selections in Express Entry with a minimum threshold, which was about 299, which was 300 points. That was for the trades. So trade specialists are able to pass, and they're able to pass with their own minimum threshold, which is great, I guess, right? Because that opens you the door for successful immigration with the very, very low IELTS test results. Or, of course, TEF, TCF if you're taking French. And now, provincial streams. Don't forget that almost every single province in Canada would have at least one provincial stream which would allow you to immigrate with the language test results very close to CLB 4 or CLB 5. And when we're talking about CLB 4 or 5, right, it's 4 to 5 in your IELTS test results, which is extremely low, right? So practically speaking, you're able to immigrate to Canada with a very, very low language test results, but there's always this but. Either you have to have connections with Canada, right? You got relatives, such as the requirement for Manitoba, you got a job offer. Either this or that way, you have to be connected to the province. But that is also doable as well. So all you would have to do is just to look at the case carefully, assess it properly, right? And see if you would be able to qualify for it. There are many, many cases where it's possible to pass through provincial immigration with IELTS test results 4 or 5. Somehow, I'm not sure why lots of applicants, when it comes down to low language test results requirements, right, they immediately start looking at the pilots. What I want you guys and gals to understand is that there is way more opportunities above and beyond just pilot programs, right? Atlantic pilot program, rural pilot program is not the end of the story. Yes, it would be good when municipal pilot opens up, but all in all, provincial streams are still there. They're still a very, very good alternative for those of you who are looking to come to Canada. And if your language test is somewhat close to IELTS 4 or 5, well, that's the way, right? Assess your chances and look at the Federal Skilled Trades. Program works perfectly fine. Despite COVID, there were still selections in the program, right? And you do not compete against thousands and thousands of applicants, right? Typically, we're talking about hundreds of applicants, right? Those who have qualifications for trades. So essentially, with your CLB score, with your Express Entry score, somewhat close to 300 points, you're still able to pass, and so on, right? Moving forward with this, when it comes down to multi-step immigration to Canada. Sorry, I was just checking my stream, right? When it comes down to multi-step immigration to Canada, that is a different approach. So say, look, I don't have a job offer right now. I do not have connections with the province right now. I do not have relatives in the province, and then so on and so on. What I could do in order to secure my immigration to Canada, if my language test results are somewhat close to 4 or 5. Well, we could look at the alternatives, we could look at the options where we could come to Canada, right, and still transform our temporary visa to immigration to Canada, depending on how exactly it would play out, but there are different opportunities, right? So one of the options listed in here, and I will be giving you several examples today, is when you receive a temporary visa to Canada, you are coming to visit your relatives, you are coming here for the purpose of talking to business representatives because your company has sent you for an exhibition. You're coming here for the language test, or coming here for say language courses, right? You're taking a particular course in English or in French combined with a business skills course and so on, right? And when you came to Canada, there are multiple opportunities to increase your language test, right, or language abilities, and there are multiple opportunities for you to connect yourself with an employer in Canada. That is way more important because employers, they're still human beings, right? Despite the fact that your CV is wonderful, it looks lovely, right? There's far lesser employers who would be able to hire you from abroad than those who will consider your application when you're in Canada. I'm not necessarily saying that right now, especially during COVID, right, it's not possible to get yourself an employer from outside of Canada. It is possible. Many employers will be looking at remote workers. Many employers will still be considering you remotely. But again, we're still human beings, and I, as a person, would prefer to see somebody sitting across the table and talking to me when it comes down to an interview. And this person might not be legally authorized to work in Canada yet, but at least this person is in here, and that creates a huge difference for me as a human being, right, to make sure that I might potentially consider hiring this gentleman or lady and make sure that we would be able to help them with the future immigration, right? So what you could do meanwhile you're in Canada, you could still master your language skills, right, apart from just finding an employer. And then again, while you're still in Canada, you could still apply for immigration, right? You could immigrate under one of the provincial streams, under one of the federal streams. So opportunities are still there, and there are plenty of them when it comes down to the point when you are in Canada. Of course, on the downside of it, right, is the fact that, yep, it's expensive, right? You have to live in Canada. You have to have a more or less clear plan in your head how you will be playing it out and what would be your plan B and plan C and so on if actually situation turns south. But all in all, this pathway, when you come to Canada and you come with the understanding on how to play it out properly, works perfectly fine for many applicants. Now, let us just look at the example in here. Hold on. Yep, here we go. Just 1 second. I'm just a bit lost in a slide in here, right? We will be talking about the alternatives with respect to your language tests in a second. Now, speaking about those, many applicants somehow do not realize that apart from IELTS test results, right, you could still take your CELPIP test, which is not available in many countries, but CELPIP is generally easier to take than IELTS. And typically, I would say when it comes down to CELPIP, based again on the feedback of many of our applicants, taking CELPIP is much easier than taking IELTS when you are either in Canada or in one of the countries which allow you to take that exam. Reason being, well, it's all computer based. I know that IELTS is mostly computer based worldwide right now, but still, CELPIP is tailored and designed for Canada only, and CELPIP allows you to prepare for it well in advance deeper into how the testing will be playing out, what exactly will be there. So my personal opinion, CELPIP is easier to take. Now, again, of course, when you're in Canada, you could take your language courses, which you could later on transform into academic studies. You could also be practicing your daily communication. So essentially, when it comes down to coming to Canada, it works much better. Now, here is an example right, on how you could play it out with your language skills when you arrive to Canada. So when you arrive here under a temporary visa, you do not necessarily have to apply for studies, right? You could go to a college or go to a language course, right, and practice your language test and increase your language test results by preparing and having this specific preparation for the exam, right? You could also consider an option of going forward for free courses which are available in Canada during multiple institutions and in multiple institutions, where you could essentially practice your language test and practice your preparation for IELTS, for CELPIP, for TEF, TCF, absolutely free of charge. Now, when it comes down to this point on how to do it properly, right, here's an example of the pathway where one could take when you arrive into Canada. So say you came here under a temporary visa. You decided to go for your language courses just to practice while you're in Canada for a few weeks. These language courses, if they're taken in a specific school, may allow you after completion of those courses to transition to professional studies, to an academic study in a college or in a university. You could do that without much of a difficulty. Again, we're not talking about the point where you have ever taken your IELTS test result or IELTS test or CELPIP or TEF. So you don't even have to take it. Once it's done, so you completed your professional studies, you could graduate and work in Canada. Again, you have never ever taken your IELTS yet, right? And then later on apply for immigration, and only at that stage you would have to take your language test. Here's again an example, a different one, and that is for an owner-operator. I believe that before we switch to an owner-operator, I would just mention you another interesting point on how you could transition from low language skills, right, towards immigration, still with taking your language test exam, but without actually having higher IELTS or CELPIP. So say one of the options in here is going forward with the story where you come here, you take your driving test as a truck driver. You go to a truck driving school, right? While you come here under a temporary visa, you go to a truck driving school, you prepare, you take your driver's exam, you pass it, you find yourself an employer in Canada, which is way easier than for any other occupation, because there are many employers who are looking for fresh truck drivers. They are looking to hire you. Many of these employers already have approved LMIA because they desperately need workers, and they usually apply for this LMIA way in advance. And if you have it, right, you're able to later on transform your truck driving experience. So you were hired, right, you change your status to work permit, you work in our country, and then you could apply for immigration. There are pilot programs for truck drivers, there are federal programs, there are provincial programs. There are ways for you still to immigrate, and we're talking about your language test results close to CLB 4 to CLB 5, nowhere close to IELTS 6 or 7, right? It's not CLB 9 required to pass successfully through express entry. Another interesting option to pass, as I said, is an owner-operator. And when it comes to an owner-operator, it's a possibility for yourself to transition from low language skills to a successful immigration to Canada. Now, this one is connected with express entry. So we're talking about the point where eventually you would still have IELTS at a level of 6 or 7, probably somewhere close to 6, but you do not need to have it in the beginning. You do not have to have your IELTS test results right now. So what essentially it means is that you are able to come here by the invitation from your own company, and your own company in Canada, which you have incorporated remotely, would act as an employer for you. In other words, you are able to come here, you are able to actually play out properly with your business experience or professional experience, where you incorporate a company in Canada, you open this business remotely, right? You come here under a work permit. Again, you do not require to have IELTS 6 or 7 for it. You start working in your own company. You start gaining Canadian experience. You start communicating with people on a daily basis, right? It's practically impossible for you to not to achieve IELTS 6, right, at some stage, because again, like you're communicating with people on a daily basis. You're working, you're in a business, you're picking up your language every single day. And then you transition from this stage, right, towards your successful immigration. And that is the point where you got LMIA. That is the point where you got 200 points, which you put on top of your Express Entry profile. And even if you had like 300 points in Express Entry, right now it suddenly gets to 500 points, right, and allows you to immigrate without any problems, which does not require you to have CLB 9, which does not require you to be way younger than you are, and so on, right? So you do not have to change your educational credentials and have, say, CLB 9 in order for you to qualify successfully. This owner-operator pathway is a very, very interesting option if you're looking at the alternatives, right? I would say that if you want to be a successful applicant, the idea here is that you gotta look at all of the options we listed on the first slide, right? When we seek for pilots, when we seek for self-employed immigration, when we look at the trades and the possibility for you to come here, right, and take a provincial exam or get yourself an employer in Canada who's hiring you for trades, right, or look at PNPs where you got connections to one of the provinces, and not necessarily this connection would serve, say, as a job offer. It could be Manitoba where you got relatives or friends, and then moving on to Canada. And of course, as a side note, you still got this owner-operator pathway, which is looming on the horizon all the time, because that is your invitation. That's your 200 points for Express Entry, again, without retaking your IELTS test exam. Now, going on, I just want to sort of wrap up this part of our masterclass with respect to where I am talking and rather, not listening to you. I would rather speak here about the opportunities which are often overlooked. Many applicants coming in and saying, hey, I got IELTS 5.5, I got barely 6, I'm not able to score higher, and in many instances, this could be fixed easily within a matter of weeks with the proper IELTS test preparation. You have no idea how many people actually overlook it, right? If you're struggling to jump from 5 to 6, one of the best ways for you to do that and to close that gap would be taking a professional IELTS test course in your local home country. Most of the IELTS test centers would have either a recommendation or would be acting as professional IELTS test preparation courses, and the gap between 5 and 6, a gap of 1 point, could usually be closed very easily by proper preparation, because it's not necessarily about your language test abilities, it is also about your ability to take the test, knowing your timing, knowing how to properly prepare for it, what exactly is expected from you, and usually it works without much of a problem. Now, CELPIP test, right, as I said, it's a very, very professional, very good alternative, which allows you to apply and allows you to take another test, and this test is typically easier than IELTS. That's my personal opinion and an opinion of many applicants of ours. Now, when it comes down to the last but not least point, I would say that appealing your IELTS test results is a very interesting option, sometimes overlooked by applicants because appeal costs money. I realize that, but in many countries there is still the protocol in IELTS test centers that if appeal is granted, so if your appeal is successful, they will allow you to get all your money back, which you paid for the appeal, right? Because they were wrong in this sense. And appeal allows in more than 65% of cases to increase your IELTS test score. Just mind that. Now, before we go forward, we will of course speak about their next live webinar, and I of course sincerely invite you to participate in it, and remind you that if you want us to look at your case, CICTV/go, CICTV.ca/go, that's where you could go for us to assess your chances for immigration. Before we get into there, of course, right, we have the second part of our communication today where I would be able to answer your questions, right? Let me just switch the screen in here, I would just take a very, very quick pause, if you don't mind, for a couple seconds. Just want to sip my coffee, catch a little bit of breath. And what I would be doing next, I will be reading your questions and practically will be answering those questions right from the list where you ask them right away. Now, I would just put it on hold for a couple of seconds, as I said, for me to sip a coffee while this presentation is running, and I will be getting back to you immediately.
The Canadian Immigration Channel introduces the owner-operator pathway of the owner-operator immigration. Immigrating to Canada as an owner-operator is a way of creating a workplace in Canada for yourself. First, you create your own Canadian company. In many cases, you don't even have to come to Canada to become a company owner. Set up a business bank account, register with Canadian tax authorities, create a website, and prepare the infrastructure for a successful start. Now it's time to apply for a work permit and come to Canada to start working in your own company. People working legally in Canada, including yourself, enjoy extra benefits in dozens of immigration programs. If you speak English or French, have experience in running a business or working as a freelancer, possess sufficient funds to start a new business, you meet the 3 principal requirements to start the immigration process to Canada as an owner-operator. Step 1. Create your own corporation in Canada without leaving home. Rest assured, our specialists will make this process comfortable for you. Step 2. Come and get employed from your very first day in Canada. Step 3. Now when you have a job in a Canadian company and the valuable Canadian work experience, choose one of many immigration programs available to apply for permanent residence. Canadian immigration system is changing. Don't wait until it is too late. Start now by sending an email to info@cictv.ca and our specialists will get in touch with you soon. See you in Canada.
Let me just turn on the sound. Yeah, you should be able to hear me now properly. I'm just making sure that it works. Let me just pop up your chat screen in here. Yep, that you're able to see me on, and yep, here we go. So I will be able to answer your questions and address your concerns right now. If I mispronounce your name, my apologies for it, but I would try to be as careful as possible in here. Yep, is it possible to apply for multiple streams? It is possible to express your interest in applying for multiple streams. Now, here's an example, okay? So say you got your level language test results and you got SEAL B5. You got friends or relatives in Manitoba. You also got enough skills to apply for Saskatchewan Provincial Nominee Program. You could create your expression of interest for both of these streams. And at the same time, that is not an application yet. Application starts when you are invited and you accept this application. So from the moment you are accepting this application, you have to cancel and delete your other invitations, your other expressions of interest. So in this sense, yeah, you could express your desire to immigrate to several provincial through several provincial or territorial or federal streams. Feel free to do that, but once you're selected, make sure that the other ones are deleted completely. Quebec website says French is not mandatory for Quebec skills program. That is absolutely true, though. Somia, sorry if I mispronounce it. So when it comes down to Quebec, Quebec stands differently and stands on the side from federal immigration and from all other provinces. If you're looking to immigrate to Quebec, mind you, you cannot create express entry profile. You cannot express your interest in moving anywhere else in Canada. You have to focus on Quebec. And Quebec officers have full right to exercise their substituted evaluation, if you will, in this sense, where they could look at your profile, you qualify with respect to all the points, right? But they could express a reasonable doubt that you would be able to settle in Quebec if you do not speak French. So in other words, I have enough points to pass, but I just do not speak French, right? How will you be living in Quebec? And if you do not address this point correctly, and if you're not able to take your language test or explain, right, deliberately and deeply in how you will be able to do that, you might be actually be refused. Now, here's an interesting example, because since we started talking about substitute evaluation, I think I've mentioned it before in one of the webinars, but maybe for the sake of repetition, maybe for those of you who don't know it yet, federal officers are allowed to use the same right when it comes down to immigration. Here's an interesting example from the practice. An applicant comes to us when she already received nomination from Manitoba. So, I mean, she's on the brink of immigration already. She applied to federal officers. Everything is fine. Federal officers are saying, look, we believe that your language skills are not sufficient enough for you to successfully work in Manitoba in your occupation. Despite the fact that you were nominated by Manitoba, we will refuse your application unless you provide your new IELTS test result within the matter of 60 days. We had to dig deeper and actually reach the middle ground with officers, because they were requiring this particular applicant to have 7.5. We reached the agreement on 6.5 because that was the requirement of Manitoba Professional Nurses Association, and this person was a nurse. But here's an interesting example. Again, like, look, Manitoba approved me, right? I got all the points, I got all the necessary skills. Federal officers are saying, no, we are the decision makers, and we're actually allowed to refuse your case. So be very mindful when you're applying. Know what you're doing. Now, could you please explain how Manitoba Support Program works? You have 74, you don't have a job offer. So, oh, Samia again. See, that's a perfect example when it comes down to the point where a person is trying to express interest in different immigration pathways. So Manitoba has minimum requirements of connection with the province. You have either a job offer, or you previously worked or studied in Manitoba, or you got friends, very close friends or relatives in Manitoba. So you have to have a connection with the province, or you were nominated by Manitoba officers, and we can talk about it in a second. So when it comes down to the first ones, except for Manitoba officers nomination, you have to be very, very tightly connected to Manitoba. But if you have friends or relatives, if you meet the minimum requirements on the language test result, and that's CLB 6 or 5, I believe, you're able to create your expression of interest to Manitoba, and Manitoba will be selecting applicants in the same manner as Express Entry does. So that is the competitive edge where Manitoba is looking at your application. There are factors taken into consideration, good and bad one, whether or not you were refused your visa to or tried to immigrate to any other province, do you have relatives in other provinces, and so on. Now, when it comes down to the second part of it, because I believe that many of you would be interested to hear about this nomination from officers, if you were invited by officers to participate in internal sessions, so you were invited to participate in a session inside Canada and talk to Manitoba provincial officers, or you were talking to these officers outside of Canada through one of Manitoba's external events, or you were meeting these officers at Destination Canada. That's why I want to focus your attention on it, because Destination Canada is the event which will take place in February and March in Paris and in Brussels, and that's where traditionally Manitoba officers are coming in. And if you were nominated by them and there, you got additional points, lots of actually points, for you to successfully immigrate to Manitoba. That's one of the options when you do not have a job offer, do not have relatives at all. What would be the appropriate cost and what would be involved with this owner-operator pathway? Sarvesh. Again, sorry if I just don't pronounce it correctly. So when it comes down to immigration through this owner-operator pathway, there is no definite financial threshold, but the minimum points here are that you have to have either managerial or business experience, or being a professional. So I would elaborate on what professional means. When it comes down to managerial experience, you either are running your own business, or you're in a senior managerial role in a small, medium, or large business. So we're not talking necessarily about huge enterprises. You could be in a very small business. You're a manager, you're running this business, you know how to deal with this. It might be a small hotel or motel, right? It might be a coffee chain, right? Or a coffee shop, and you know, and you manage it. It's not necessarily your business though. When it comes down to professionals, for example, you're a professional dentist. You're looking to open a dentistry clinic in Canada, and you do not necessarily have to be licensed as a dentist in the province of Ontario, for example. That's where we are right now. right? In order for you to own this clinic, you're creating additional workplaces, you're hiring people, you create business and generate taxable income for Canada. So Canadian officers would be more than happy to see you. Now, when it comes down to the financial threshold, I would say that the right starting point for discussion this owner operator would be somewhat close to I would say maybe 100,000 Canadian dollars in your pocket, right? There are businesses which are sold cheaper, but all in all, your expenses for incorporation, legal costs, and so on would be quite high. So it's not an easy program to go for in terms of the financial burden. But I would say compared to the point when you study in Canada, for example, for a couple of years, owner operator might be cheaper. That's the way I would put it, right? You finished your 2-year study in Ontario. Which program would be the best for immigration? Well, it's hard to say, Samit, without knowing your whole profile. If you would like us to consult you, feel free to drop us a line. We'll just set up the individual consultation and look at all of your options, right? It's not necessarily we would be talking about Ontario provincial streams for students. Just have to look at your profile from A to Z to understand where we're standing. If you open a consulting company in Canada, could you apply for an owner operator and come to Canada on work visa? Sarfaraj. Now, I can't comment on a particular consultancy because it really depends on what kind of consultancy is it, right? Whether or not this consultancy would require you as a person, Sarfaraj, to come to Canada and work, right? Or why don't you work remotely? So all these points have to be addressed when the application for work permit is lodged, right? You have to have a comprehensive business plan. We of course help with this, but all in all, it has to be a point where it's clear that your personal presence in Canada is mandatory for this business to successfully fly, right? So you have to be here. Though I would say that the program is one of the easiest ones right now during COVID, because you guys are those who are coming here, who are helping to restore the economy, to put it right back on the right track, and you create additional workplaces. So this program is prioritized. Anyone advise can PR process via express entry profile once got PNP nomination? Aga? Now, it's an interesting question. It really depends on whether or not you qualify for express entry and whether or not provincial stream allows you to go through this, right? So say, speaking about Manitoba, since we are mentioning it today, right? Manitoba has several streams. It has this direct stream where you're applying directly to Manitoba, and after Manitoba nomination, you could apply for immigration to Canada on paper. So you do not have to touch express entry ever. So if your language test abilities are somewhat close to a CLB 5, 6, right? You do not score enough points to apply for express entry. Good for you, right? You still have an option to immigrate. Now, at the same time, if you have your express entry profile, you could link your Manitoba invitation to it, get yourself 600 points for this nomination, and successfully pass through express entry. Benefit, much faster immigration, right? Well, downside, language test requirements, right, and other requirements of express entry as well. Is it a good idea for one of the, okay, I guess not finished your question yet. How much would be investment to study on a graduate program for about 2 years, and while studying, is the person able to work full-time? The person who's studying in Canada is studying full-time is not able to work full-time at the same time. You're allowed to work 50% of what's allocated in your week. So in other words, it's 20 hours per week while you're studying, and while you're on vacation break, you're able to work full-time. Now, studies in Canada would typically cost you, it's very difficult to say because universities and colleges, their prices vary depending on what you're studying, right, where you're studying. But I would say I would be prepared to put on the table somewhat close to 35,000 Canadian dollars for 2 years of study. Plus, you have to make sure that you don't forget about living expenses. So all in all, you should say goodbye to at least 50,000 Canadian dollars for studying in 2 years for living expenses and studies. Well, I'm not saying goodbye or farewell to this money completely, because that opens the door for your immigration. That also allows you to get a Canadian diploma. But I would say with compared to that, that to the expenses of an owner operator, not the business expenses, right? So say you got $100,000 which you invest in your own business, this money is still there. That's your business, right? And you got it, you may sell it later on and so on, right? When we're comparing apples to apples, right? So those money which you would spend when you study in Canada for 2 years versus money which you would spend on incorporation in Canada and legal expenses, right? Owner operator might be cheaper. You also have a master's degree from United Kingdom. Your native language is Spanish. Not sure. Christian might actually have overlooked the first part of your question. So you're from Indonesia, okay? You got CLB 7, master's degree, 10 years experience English teacher, but got some job experience in past call center and so on. What are your chances? Well, I'll have to look at this a little bit deeper, but I would say that your chances might be quite okay. Again, like it all depends on how we could present your case, right? Were you teaching this English classes to kids? How old were they, right? Were they, say, 4 years old, right? Could it qualify for an early childhood educator, depending on your abilities and skills, right? Could we create your express entry profile? If yes, with an early childhood educator, could you qualify for Nova Scotia selection, right? It's a sort of, multi-dimensional question where we have to look at the complete picture in order to answer your question. But in general, the answer is yes, but yes, comma, what goes afterwards would depend on your skills and abilities. If you want, again, like us to sit together and look at your case, well, mostly welcome. We would be more than glad to look at your profile and help you out. If your express entry points are 300 and IELTS 6.5, having no relative in Canada, no Canadian experience, what would be the option for me? You got PhD in pharmacy. Have to look at your profile to say, because it would depend on your abilities, right? Like it depends on your work experience. Because say one of the options, right? How about I look at this again, owner operator. That's the first thing which comes to mind. If I'm assuming that Pyramid, I'm not sure if it's your real name, but say Mr. Pyramid is a pharmacist, because you got PhD in pharmacy, so it's difficult to assume otherwise, right? If you're a pharmacist, if you got this years of experience, how about you just come here and open a clinic, right? As I said, depending on what kind of clinic it would be, you do not necessarily have to be a licensed pharmacist or a doctor in Canada, but that is the owner-operator pathway. That's 200 points in your express entry profile, which transforms your 380 to 580, right? Even if your age impacts your score, you still will be able to immigrate successfully. Again, that's what I could get from 2 lines of the text which you submitted in here. I don't know your profile completely, and I would be more than glad to look deeper into your file, but all in all, that's what I can get out of it. Can you email us? Absolutely, you could email us. Like, look, at any time. The whole purpose of this conversation is to answer your questions. Because, guys, I mean, I'm so sorry. It's 20 minutes past 10 p.m. in Toronto, and I have better things to do. I still got family, right? And the only reason we meet so often and deliver these presentations and tell you how they work is for us to answer your questions. We don't charge anything for it, and trying to help you out to understand how immigration works. Because I feel that lots of applicants, they're sort of, sitting in this box of express entry or pilots, and they just don't see anything above and beyond, right? Sometimes there are mumbles and rumors about owner operator, about P&Ps, but lots of people just don't understand how they are incorporated with each other, how they work. And we studied this master classes because we want to add on something apart from our short videos on YouTube, where we explain you from A to Z how it all works, right? Because we could see it for days and days, right, streaming live and telling you how different immigration pathways in Canada work, and I just want to make sure that you would understand them. Can you apply multiple provincial programs at the same time? I believe I addressed this question a few minutes ago when we started this question and answer section, so this webinar will be recorded so you could get back to it without much of a problem. I just, don't want to take time from other listeners. Please respond to my question. I'm not sure what your question was. So guys, there's a couple hundred of you right now in here, and a few hundred more are watching and joining and typing their questions right now. So it's humanly not possible for me to look at it unless you repeat the question. How many years of work experience is requirement to be eligible to apply for express entry as a skilled worker, Vincata? So as the very minimum requirement, you have to meet the requirements of one of the federal immigration programs. Say federal skilled worker would require you to have at least 1 year of skilled experience out of the last 10 years. This year has to be continuous in one NOC code, right? Continuous does not mean that you are working for one employer. It has to be full-time, but say if there was a little break and you quit your job today, the day after tomorrow you joined another employer, that would qualify as well, as long as the same NOC code. It's a skilled experience for 1 year out of the last 10 years. That would be the minimum work experience. I hope that helps your question. Is there any travel restriction coming for Indonesia, from Indonesia? If you apply for a visitor visa right now, well, right now you're not able to come to Canada until, I believe, October 21st, unless you have very close relatives in Canada, or you got specific reasons for traveling, such as attending government event or something of an importance. Well, we're all in this COVID, so coming for leisure right now is not a good idea. But applications for temporary visas are processed though. So when we're saying that, borders are closed, well, they are mostly closed with our southern neighbors, but all in all, there are visitors coming to Canada and temporary visas are processed. So the situation is way better than it was about like 4 or 5 months ago in this regards. Is it okay not to mention close relatives living in Canada? Your relative doesn't want to help you, so you don't know if you should put them or not. No, it's not a good idea. Lying to immigration authorities is not a good idea. Concealing any information from them is not a good idea. What I would probably do if I were in your situation, Marilyn, can't pronounce your name properly, my apologies for it. So what I would probably do is I would mention the fact that I have a relative, okay? I might not be scoring points for him or her in express entry. It's totally fine, say, not to tick that point, right? But I would rather provide proper explanation to officers saying, look, I know I have a relative, I know I got a close relative, we're not in good terms, we're not communicating with each other, so I decided to do this not to score these points because this lady or gentleman is not ready to help me, though I still believe that I have to inform you about it because you asked the question and I believe that I have to answer this question truthfully. You're 16 years old, you're applying for study visa. Can your family come to Canada on a visitor visa and apply for PR? Mashallah. Okay. When it comes down to say I'm applying for a study visa, can my relatives come? It would depend on your relatives, of course, because essentially they're applying on their own, right? They're own applicants, they're over 18 years old, so their application will be processed separately. They can't just come to you as your guardians in this sense, right? Indefinitely. So their visa should be granted. Now, if it is granted, whether or not they could transform it later on to permanent residency will depend on their personal circumstances, right? Are they able to get an employer in Canada? Are they able to change their status to professional status to study permit, right? Study at an academic institution and then apply for immigration under one of the federal or provincial streams. Well, have to look in their case deeper, right, to answer the question. If you want us to look into this, right, and sit with them, sort of to say tete-a-tete, face-to-face, and assess your chances, mostly welcome. Again, we're conducting consultations as well. We do not necessarily have to take your whole case, right, but if you want us to look deeper into this, give you a vector on where to move to, right, what direction to take, well, we'll be glad to. What is the total assessment score needed for express entry? I'm not sure, Susharita, I understand your question properly, but as I said, in order for you to apply for express entry, you have to qualify for the minimum requirements of one of the federal programs. One of these programs, federal skilled worker, 67 points out of 100. Where do you get these points? For your age, for your education, for your language abilities, and for your work experience. Altogether, you have to qualify, you have to get 67 points. That opens doors to express entry. That's not the same as passing through express entry, right? That's you meeting the minimum requirement. I think we spoke about it in one of the previous webinars where we explained what is express entry, how it works, how it aligns with provincial programs. So that, I guess, should answer your question about the minimum requirement to apply for express entry. Is it good to hold on application of study permit? You have colleagues that their study permits are refused with the reasons that the officer is not sure that they will leave Canada. Well, there are multiple reasons for an officer to refuse an application for study permit for a temporary visa of any kind, depending on particular circumstances of individuals. And if you're applying for a temporary visa, it's always a twofold test. Why am I coming to Canada? Not to the United States, not to Australia, and so on, right? Why specifically to Canada? Why I have to study in this particular academic institution at this particular program, right? How that aligns with me, with my career, and what will make me return back home. Is there a family waiting for me, right? Is there a wonderful career which I can build in my home country, right? Is there a company waiting for me? Does the company actually support me? And so on and so on, right? So as long as these two aligned properly, officers will be more than willing to approve your study permit. Okay. How many years of on owner-operator pathway till PR and citizenship? Well, citizenship has absolutely nothing to do with this. It's a separate process. When you come to Canada, settle in here, pay your taxes, take your citizenship test, and so on. So your ultimate goal in this sense is permanent residency as of now. And when it comes down to owner-operator pathway, now you have two options. Option number one, you incorporate the company, the new company, right? You started from the fresh, I would say, right? From the ground zero. So you come here, you start looking for the pathway, you start looking for the right place, open the business, right? Start running the business. You will be going through the series of compliance review where officers would see whether or not the business has started running, the business starts to operate, and if everything goes fine, after a year, you're able to apply for immigration. Now, immigration will take you about 6 months on top of that, so a year and a half. Another option, if you want to do it faster, you buy an existing business. If this existing business operates, so you kind of change management, right? You just swap it. You come here and you apply for immigration right away because you don't have to prove that the business is working. It is working. You just don't have to mess it up and make sure that you would just continue running this business. That's two opportunities which you have on the table, but in either case, you're already in Canada, you're working in Canada, right? Even in the first option, if you want to open the company from the scratch, which is generally a bit cheaper, yeah, I mean, you're still working in here. Your spouse could be working as well, have an open work permit. Your kids could go to municipal school free of charge, so everything is fine in this regards as well. You got CLB7. What are your chances? I think I answered this question before, Jamal, or it sounds very, very familiar, but I think I answered this question before. That was your question about the opportunities with CLB7. Okay, you have you have IELTS 7.5, around 15 years of work experience in office administration, high school certificate. What are your chances? Gotta look at the situation a bit deeper, but I think if it's 7.5, 15 years of experience in office administration, owner-operator might be an option. Pilots might be an option as well. I would rather wait for employers to wake up a little bit from COVID because that's the biggest problem and challenge for them, but may work as well. Now, I would rather say that as of now, speaking about today, right, September 24th, one of the options to look at would be an owner-operator, right? It would just allow you to overcome the lack of your education. That's one of the options I would say. What is the minimum funds requirement under owner-operator program? I think I addressed that question a minute ago. Now, we have slowly but steadily approached to the point where we were talking for an hour, answering your questions, addressing your concerns. I can't physically answer all of those. There's way many of those questions, and if I have missed some, feel free to send us an email. I think we'll be able to answer those questions over email as well. Let me just get back here for a second just to remind you for assessment of your chances for our next webinars to join. Feel free to click on those if you want us to look into your case, if you will want us to continue talking to you during this live events, feel free to join. And as of now, thank you all for participation. Thank you all for your valuable questions. I really appreciate you coming in. My apologies if I was not able to answer all of these questions and address all of the concerns, but I would be more than glad to do that next time, and of course more than glad to answer them over email. Well, I hope to see many of you in Canada, and at this point, goodbye.